And now on to our first featured reader, Vasiliki Albedo, whose poems have recently appeared in the Poetry Review, Poetry London, London Magazine, Oxford Poetry, Agni, Wasafiri, MS Lexia. I'm not sure always how to pronounce it. I think it's MS Lexia, The North, the Rialto, Magma, and elsewhere. She has been commended in a National Poetry, the Ambit, and Hippocrates competitions, and shortlisted for the Britport, the Sylvia Plath Prize, the Statica, and the Magma and Poetry London pamphlet prizes, among others. She was a finalist in Frontiers Global Poetry Prize, won the Poetry Society's 2022 Stanza Competition, Live Cannons Pamphlet competition, and Poetry International's Tiny Chapbook Prize. And well, we have a few traditions and rituals over here at Poetry Lit, and one of them is that I always start off with a little reflection, having read a bit of the work of a poet. So Vasiliki, here's my reflection on your poems. And I thought these were poems where worlds meet. A modern world of Paninis and Audis and the Xbox, but that world is in a way only a top layer, surfacing another more eternal world. A world where danger lurks, especially in places or with people that are supposed to be safe. But there's also a sense of survival that is as strong or even stronger, for it can leave its mark on paper and be fertile in that way. This is a poetry of fists, of knives and guns, of blood, of bodies, and of the resilience that is woven within them. And what makes these poems so powerful to me is the tone of understatement, of almost detached observation, but not quite detached, not quite as detached as it seems. For as each poem is built on a carefully crafted tension, it will draw you in with a quiet determination. And we also always start with a question to the poets before they launch into their reading. And my question today is basically based on that Louise Glück poem that starts with that wonderful line at the end of My Suffering, There Was a Door. And I think that image of the door is really wonderful. And so I wanted to ask you, Vasiliki, what kind of door is poetry for you, or what does it lead into?
Thank you, Mila. I don't even know what to say about your incredibly wonderful introduction. It's such an honor to be read like this. Thank you. Thank you very much. And for inviting me here tonight as well, and for the audience for coming to listen to us. And it's a pleasure to be reading with Joseph Fasano, whose work I love and who does so much for poetry, to promote poetry online. So if poetry were a door, I'm reminded of these lines in a poem by the American poet Paul Tran in his book, All the Flowers Kneeling. And he says, poetry is a mirror I use to look not at, but into myself. And if poetry were a door, for me, it would be a door through which I enter into myself, and also a door through which I process the world as it appears to me, through which I engage more deeply with the particular way that the world affects me, but also, I think, a door into another world, a world of imagination and the mind. It lets the world sort of transform in me, and it is one of the ways in which I enter into the world.
Thank you so much. And having read a bit of your poems, that makes really perfect sense for me. And that would be a great moment for you to start your reading and take us into your world, please.
Thank you. I'll be sharing my screen so that you can all read along. Can you see that? Okay, wonderful. So I'll be reading 5 poems. My first 2 poems are related to the family. And this poem is called Bitter. My mother and I sit at a hotel cafe. Neither of us touch the tea or panini. We stare at the gold-trimmed walls, barrack chairs, faux marble pillars. We've cheated hours nudging queens, pawns, and towers through another chemotherapy round. I have held her, hairless and vomiting. Promise you'll move back home to help me, she says. I remember the times she locked me in my room, or her hand bruising my cheeks, until at 8 years old I raised my palm to crack the porcelain of her face. Remember she told me to leave home at 14, and the promise I made to myself. I'd root as far from her as I could. The bread toughens and the tea's cold, steeping, bitter. I don't think I can, I reply, as we sit across each other in a room filled with reproductions. Our country. Our house was a country my parents founded, but none of us were citizens. Nights, the corridor's iron gate was a border, locking us in our rooms. My mother was both state and warden. I wrapped a hair around my diary before leaving for school. Each afternoon found it broken. Inside I wrote, "If you can read this, I hate you," and felt glee to see her eyes hold back the rage. After my father bought a red Camaro and started his string of work trips, my mother lay bare on the balcony to catch the sun. Her pubic hair a briar patch, startling the neighbors and my brother's friends in the grimy capital of our kitchen. Indifferent as any god, my father occasionally brought about a miracle, a new television or a bag of sweets. Once I called him by his name and he struck me to the floor. A Glock slung on his belt. At mealtimes, he lay the black hole of its barrel next to the calamari. To divorce was to secede, forbidden territory. I'm staying for you, for the children was their gospel. The winter she thought Dad had tapped the phone, we laughed until I tuned into my mother's call on my radio. That night, she took a knife to God, and we fled into the dark. But the state later denied this ever happened. My next poem is from my pamphlet, Fire in the Oubliette, published by Live Canon, and it needs a slight content warning for attempted sexual assault. Resin. The air holds the shape of a pine forest burning as blood vessels tighten around a fresh cut to seal the world out, contain the damage. You trace your platelets' own resin on the side of your face, and the scent of dusk and amber rises. You marvel again at the fibrous workmanship that shaped this scar, a sprig of time, irregular and one of a kind. It embodies memories you can touch with your fingertips, a lover with lips, a knife carving into your left cheek, the friend of a friend who followed you home, the man to whom you said no, the force of that word that made him so weak, and the strength that you found that was not just the bodies, the resilience the engraving revealed, and the shock on your father's face when he saw you. But the body will heal. Even as you were fighting him off, your blood had started the labor of clotting, a new bonding growing within. And since what you fear lives as your shadow, you've learned how fertile it is. To put it on paper until it marks the page, like this. So nature is really important to me. In my day job, I work as a renewable energy strategist, and in my personal life, I find a lot of solace in nature. I live very close to a mountainous forest, which has unfortunately been burned down a couple of times, but I try to go and walk or hike there as often as I can. I find it really helpful for my mental health. On the day the war starts, I walk onto Pedeli Mountain. The plateau is hectic with anemones, broken mirror orchids, caper quakes, bee-stung irises by the chipped blue hive, the antioxidant horta, quarried for the Parthenon and marble villa floors, the mountain a wound. Fire erased slopes are readying a flow of landslips. Athens wraps its milk-tooth necklace around Bedeli's throat. We are greedy for wild boar, spring water, fox screech, the hard liquor of sea light. Plastic straws by the gorge, pipe insulation, burned pine. The precipice circles me back to the Audis and the house with a screaming father. Listen, listen or else. And my last poem, I thought I'd end on a slightly more positive note. This poem is called What Luck. That summer, the porcelain cistern slid out of the box in my arms, landing an inch from the cat. My father's bullet whistled by my brother's head, past the Xbox through the window. A dog almost took out both my eyes. The two-seater plane in my boyfriend's amateur hands nearly crashed when the battery went flat. My mother concussed, tripping down the stairs. The indented parquet spiderweb of broken glass are reminders as we catch our breath and pat our hearts, promise to love more and say so as we exhale. What luck to learn this way. Thank you.
Thank you. And what luck for us to be able to listen to this wonderful poetry.